So thank you all so much for joining us today for this episode of In a Car with IPR. I'm Tina McCorkindale. I'm the president and CEO of the Institute, and I'm very excited. This is the first time we've had 3 people on the show at once, so I'm very excited for our guests today. We have Iman Jefferson of GM, and Kristena Lucky of BCW Global, and Brandi Boatner from IBM. So thanks so much for being here, you 3.
Thanks.
So excited to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
That was a great response. So Kristena, let's start with you. You were recently hired as Executive Vice President, Brand Solutions Practice Lead for North America at BCW Global. Prior to that, you spent 8 years at Edelman, and you also worked at one of the most well-known and respected multicultural advertising and comm firms. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your career path, and your responsibilities?
Sure. No, I'm excited. I'm on day 10, I believe, at BCW Global, and it's been fantastic. I was thrilled to go there, just looking at the work and the impact that they're having in the marketplace. And I would say overall, my story and something I coach with junior team members all the time, those new to the field, is to really be strategic about where you want to go, what you want to do, what you want to learn, put time frames on it, actually. And that's how you're going to make it happen. And so, with coming here, it was, as I said, looking at the marketplace and seeing where there's continued opportunity for me to help BCW make an impact, help build brands, and help those brands make a difference in people's lives, move people and make a difference in their lives. I think that's critical when we think about there has to be some value exchange there, right? In terms of why we want people to buy, purchase, take advantage of your product, but then also the impact that these brands can have on society. Being at Edelman, it was a great experience as well. 8 years, touched a number of different brands, a lot of integrated marketing work. And, I came there at a time when they were trying to evolve who they were in the marketplace, and I could really bring those integrated skills there. With Burrell Communications, I wanted to really dig into multicultural, and in particular the Black audience and the Black market, and I wanted to learn from the best. And Tom Burrell is the grandfather of everything, of all of this. And so it was a wonderful experience touching a number of brands, but I would say for that, it was more importantly seeing the impact that those brands are having and can positively have in the Black community. And when we think about now, this is so critical, right? And so being ahead of the time. And then before that, being with Accenture, being with Motorola on the brand marketing side, it just, it's been, I would say my journey has been one where I've been one of few, I'm going to be honest there, certainly one of few when it comes to being a woman, a Black woman, a person of color and diverse background in the organization, but one where I also was really focused on where am I trying to go? How can I continue to learn? And how can I just focus on thriving and excelling regardless of the circumstances?
That's great.
My life.
Yeah, it's great. And I love seeing that more brands are taking social justice as causes and making a difference. And talking to another Burrell alumna, Iman Jefferson, you're the head of East Region Communications for GM, which includes GMC, Cadillac, and Buick. You were also a under 40 honoree in the Michigan Chronicle, so congrats. It's great. We have so many star-studded award-winning people on this call. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your career path and responsibilities?
Sure. Well, it's interesting because I got my start in PR at Burrell Communications. Prior to that, I worked as a journalist at a small paper in Chicago and decided to make that pivot and was brought on to Burrell to really help with the media relations, right? Kind of being a former journalist, having strong writing skills, knowing how to craft a message that would connect with media, and then having those contacts. So started off at Burrell, again, huge powerhouse when it comes to just advertising agencies, and particularly understanding the multicultural market, and worked on McDonald's for 3 years. Incredible experience there. But since, I made a point, to Kristena's point around just making sure you're being really concerted about what your move is going to be next, wanted to get some general market experience. And so did a couple of stints at some other agencies, including Current, O'Malley Hanson, working on big consumer brands, everything from touching PepsiCo to working on Hanes brands, and then did a stint in-house doing global communications for a supply chain company, spent some time at US Cellular doing more telecommunications, again, heavily focused on both consumer and corporate. And now the last 3.5 years at GM. And being here, it's been great. It's crazy. It's almost been 4 years, but was initially kind of brought on to do a lot of their future of mobility story work around Maven, which is the car sharing startup, and really having a say-so on what car sharing looks like, how we're kind of answering these societal future of city needs, and how does messaging play a big role in that. And more recently been based here in New York, overseeing communications for Buick, GMC, and Cadillac. So again, trying to find ways to connect not only what the automotive brands are doing just from a product launch standpoint, but tying it back to those kind of, higher purpose, initiatives I think we're all really focused on right now, and making sure that we have a strong say-so when it comes to that, not only from an automotive perspective, but just a futurist technology perspective.
Great. Yes, and we're going to talk about some of the future of technology. All right, next is Brandi Boatner. I met you it's been a little over 10 years, and that was when you were rolling off the board when you were PRSSA president. And you have a little bit of a different path because for the past 10 years, you've been at the same place, and that's IBM. And so I should also say that you're also on the short list for the 2021 PR Week Outstanding In-House PR Professional of the Year. So congrats. We're all rooting for you. So tell us a little bit about your role and what you do.
Yeah, no, I'm so grateful. And yes, Tina, it was so crazy to think a decade ago I was coming off the student PR organization. But I always like to say I'm a child of PR. I just rolled off of PR SSA into PRSA as I started my career at IBM. And it's funny, a decade ago, social media, it wasn't what it is today, given everything that we've been through, but that was what I went to school for. I went to school to learn not only PR, but really focus on digital communications and how social media completely changed PR and how it was going to change organizations and how they communicate and how they storytell. So I really started my career there, just kind of with this social media skill set. Not for like fads and, athletes or celebrities using it, but really how can we get business value out of, our social presence. So a lot of the social properties that we have at IBM today, many of which I started 10 years ago, which is just so crazy. And I look back now, I'm like, wow, we have like a whole team of people who do that. And I was like, so remember when I started that LinkedIn account in 2010? Like, it's so funny to say things like that. But I've always been in the digital and social space. And then kind of the evolution with influencers and how we work with influencers in promoting our brand, brand reputation. And then 2020 happened, right? But let's back up before we even get to, I had such high hopes that some of my friends called me the 2020 brand ambassador because I was really pumped for the decade. I was pumped for like new things. I really, really spoke just way too soon. And so January, again, big high hopes. This is what influencer relations is going to look like. And, this is how PR is going to evolve, really heavy with data and analytics as it related to social. And then the pandemic happened in March. And so I said, okay, I'm probably going to have to pivot some of the work that I do because influencers were all at home. So it's not like we're going to events and it's not like our influencers, we can bring them, to exclusive events. It really is, what are we all doing at home? And then May 29th happened. And that's when everything in terms of my personal development, in terms of my professional development, completely pivoted. It changed. And it's not that I wasn't thinking about what would be my next kind of role or what I wanted after 10 years, at my company, but I was not ready for the pandemic, but I really wasn't ready to shift into a new position around social justice because myself, like many others, I simply assumed social justice was a given into what we already did, right? So if we are committed to diversity and inclusion, of course, we advocate for social justice. And unfortunately, over the summer, we saw a lot of brands, giving their statements of support, really showing well, no, we don't. If we talk about social justice, it might be from an HR standpoint. It's not from a comm standpoint. It's not around brand purpose, or maybe it's corporate social responsibility, but this doesn't feel right. And our employees are, so it just took on a whole different meaning. And so I was asked to temporarily lead our social justice efforts. I was asked to do that in June as, temporary assignment. Of course, I will temporarily lead social justice for the company. I am happy to do so. And then 4 months in, after a lot of actions were taken, we did amazing things in a very short amount of time. Our, leadership team said, you know what, this isn't a temporary thing. Our social justice actions and commitments, it's not temporary. So Brandi, do you want to lead social, make this like official? Do you want to lead social justice? Do you want to lead advocacy for how our employees show up around brand purpose? And I happily accepted. So I left my external, very, externally visible social media digital role and switched over and came over to the internal communications team, really focused on advocacy and how to empower and activate a lot of people around social justice efforts, around equality, equity, and allyship. And it has been fulfilling work. It has been challenging work. As a Black female in corporate America, I just had this path for myself, or I had this vision for myself that 2020 just completely kind of turned upside down on its head. And so now, as I pivot and go down a different direction, it is just such a refreshing feeling to be able to apply my expertise as a storyteller, my experiences of what I've done on social, looking at behavior, and apply that towards advocacy and social justice. So I'm very grateful, and all I can say is more to come.
Yeah, well, that's a great role for you. So that's fantastic. And I'm sure a lot of work at the same time. So
Yes.
all right, so let's talk a little bit, Brandi, you were saying about what you were doing social justice. So let's do a deep dive into this topic because it's really critically important. So IPR is a founding member of the Diversity Action Alliance, and it's a consortium of a lot of organizations with the industry that is devoted to improving diversity, inclusion, and acceleration and representation and moving toward this goal. So if you had to rate the public relations industry with how well we are doing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, what grade would it be and why? So Kristena, why don't we start with you?
What grade would it be? Listen, I'm gonna keep it real.
Please.
I would still put us at a C, probably. I think that maybe we're bucking towards a B minus, maybe. I think that we've made vast improvements since I started. However, we're not there yet. And we're certainly not there yet when it comes to a leadership to an executive level. Yes, we've had this year. What I'm thankful for is that the positive is that right now there's this moment in time, everyone's talking about it. There's a spotlight, and people, brands, companies, businesses seem committed to taking action, to actually trying to advance the efforts. That being said, I also, and I'm probably not alone, there is that skepticism of, I feel like we've been here before and yet we still don't see meaningful action. And so I think, I want the momentum to continue moving forward, but it's going to take everyone. It can't just be me. It can't just be Iman. It can't just be Brandi. It can't just be, you, Tina, and IPR. It really is at all levels, allies, accomplices coming together to address the lack of representation in the industry. And here's the thing, I wouldn't say it's just, I'm not speaking just public relations, I'm looking at marketing communications overall. As an industry, whether you're at the corporate side, whether you're in the, on the agency side, in a vendor supplier, we're not there yet. So, and perhaps the way that we advance it is, at least to be honest, as I said, with the assessment, I think it's a C, and we can't say that we've accomplished what we want to accomplish yet. And the question is, where's that sense of urgency? I don't know if there is that continued sense of urgency. and there should be.
Absolutely.
So I do want to get back to the allies and accomplices part, but I do want to hear from Iman and Brandi first, though. Iman.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to give a grade. I hate to give a non-answer, but this is an evolving issue, right? I mean, I remember 15 years ago filling out surveys around diversity in public relations, right? And it's still the same exact thing now. There's so much work to do. And to Kristena's point, like, whether you're at the agency or in the corporate level, you know, the opportunities to rise to more of these senior to, you know, executive positions are limited, and it goes across all platforms. And I think, again, it goes also beyond just marketing, PR, but also HR, like making sure we have the right people recruiting, understanding different skill sets and perspectives, and it's a holistic effort. And we have a lot to do. There's been progress, but again, there's still 75% of the people that are in the industry are white, right? So, you know, that other percentage is still not being seen. And then if they're being seen, they're being seen in more of these entry-level opportunities. So, I mean, the work still has to be done.
Great. Brandi?
Yeah, I agree. Kristena really just hit the nail on the head. I'd say a C minus. I was going to say D, but I was like, that might be too harsh. So when she said C minus, I was like, yeah, that's solid, C minus. Agreed with, you know, just everything that she said. Iman, just also her comments. I recall, so just, you know, going back to me being a child of PR, I was the first Black female president of the student organization. And at that time, the student organization was over 40 years old. And so I was the first Black female. We had the first Black was a male several years prior. And then I was the first Black female. We haven't had a Black national president of PRSSA since me. And that was, we're going on 11 years. You mean to tell me 11 years later, there's no student? So that's just one example. Going back to what Iman said about 75%, I look at just, you know, again, some of the things that I have done in my career. I feel like we keep having the same conversation. Well, where are the tangible actions that are being taken? And I think since Kristena said we're going to keep it real, I will keep it real also. I think we're not going to move the needle as quickly or as successfully as we would like to until there is some accountability held to the leaders of agencies and corporations, that maybe there is some type of financial, you know, obligation that if you don't have diverse teams, if you don't have diverse hires, you don't make as much money. If we hold people to those accountability goals, it might be really interesting to see how fast and how quickly diverse teams might emerge if it is tied to your performance or if it's tied to any of your financial benefits. So I think we really have to, you know, I know people stop talking the talk, like, yes, okay, maybe there's some assessment. Sure, we've done that. There's some actions that are being taken. Sure, that there have been, like Kristena said, vast improvement, but where's the accountability? Where's the actual hard proof that I can say to an agency leader, an agency CEO, you know what, you're not going to get as many clients. You're not going to get as much new business if everybody looks like you. That
Right.
might make a difference. Let's try it and see. I don't know. I'm a gambling woman. It might, but
You may
let's
be
try
on
it and
something,
see.
Brandi.
Well, and I think,
right.
Brandi, you bring up a good point, the accountability, but it's not just the hiring, because I've recruited people and then they leave. So it's the retention. It's, you know, what you'll see, actually, what I've seen is people come into the industry, they're hopeful, they go through various experiences, and maybe they are not seeing people that look like them at advanced levels. Maybe they don't have the, again, whether it's allies, accomplices, frankly, champions, sponsors, they don't have people to move them through the system, move them up. And so they opt out. And many I actually have seen go into other fields, or they start their own shop. And so, you know, they take that, they're, I mean, great for them that they're inspired to become entrepreneurial, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that we don't want that, right? We want to keep the talent, keep this rich,
absolutely,
rich minds in these organizations. And so, so that accountability can't just be on, okay, we've hired, there has to be that hire, that retention, that regeneration, right? And that also gets to building the pipeline. You know, you talk about as a student, well, people can't just come into it at college level? How do we get them before that, even at the high school level? For many students in Black and Brown communities, this is even on their radar.
Oh, no,
So
they think PR people plan parties. Like if you go
Right.
to Black and Brown communities, we're promoters. Like we are hype
Right.
people. That's what how they envision, as opposed to having like a fruitful career. It's like, you're the party planner. It's like, so that's not what I do.
Writing, it's not a strategy.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree. I agree with you, Kristena.
From your just observation, what could companies do better? Like what can they focus on that maybe they're not doing? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in with that one.
One thing I will say, just, again, piggybacking off what Kristena said, it's not just when you bring the talent in. So I find just in not just my own company, just in talking to, other peers, other women of color, Black women at other companies, is companies miss the boat when it comes to creating psychological safety, and even talking about psychological safety or having safe spaces within the organization. And one thing I think that has been very striking about 2020 and where we are today as we celebrate Black History Month in 2021 is now conversations about race are no longer taboo. It is not like the elephant in the room or the hush hush thing that you don't talk about. Now that we are having very open conversations about race, now that people around the world, we can't unsee what we all saw when it came to George Floyd. We can't unsee that. So when you have a conversation about race, this is new for a lot of organizations to openly talk about this consistently. There are many people who still feel very uncomfortable having these conversations, but we all know change and comfort cannot coexist. So if we want to change something, you have to be okay with being uncomfortable. But I think now, if we say this is a safe place, there will be no retaliation. If you come out and say, you know what, I didn't realize that I had biases against Black people, Hispanic people, LGBT plus. I didn't realize that. And I need to check that within myself so that I can be better, or I can just be aware that we all have bias. That's not, unless you're a robot or you're not a human being, we all have bias of some kind. Those of us who are willing to be brave enough to admit it, absolutely. But I think if we had, listen, we can have microaggression training, we do. We can have unconscious bias training, we do. We can have anti-racism training, we do. Where's the psychological safety training? Where's the training that says more than half of people that show up in the office are covering or pretending or hiding some stigma about themselves because they're afraid to be who they are in the workplace for fear that something bad will happen to them? And by bad, I mean, I won't get along with colleagues. I'll get into a conflict. That's a huge problem.
Right.
That's a huge problem, and it affects performance. So if companies aren't addressing that, which a lot of them aren't. I have this conversation about psychological safety and people are like, what? Oh, woo, covering what? You need to peel back and get to the root. Like I said, change and comfort can't work together. So let's push the envelope so that we can progress change, but we need to have necessary conversations that we're just not.
Iman, any thoughts?
No, I mean, I think Brandi captured a good chunk of it. We've done implicit bias training recently, and it covered a lot, I think, for our entire communications function. Something we're also rolling out across our entire, enterprise is making sure we have that sense of awareness, because a lot of it is just education overall. I think there is a huge point that Brandi made around just making sure people feel comfortable and bringing their true selves to work. We've been saying that's a buzz term that we say in the industry, but even yet, and still many of us, worry about, if I respond this way, will I come across as a, hate to say angry Black female or terse or anything else, when I just may be direct. And understanding personalities, all different things, and cultural nuances play a huge role in that. And having the training and awareness as leaders, if you are in fact a leader, then you should be able to understand and, be able to navigate that.
Okay, Kristena, anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that companies also need to, the part about being comfortable, being uncomfortable, they need to have honest conversations and assessments and take a look at what are the behaviors that people are demonstrating or displaying within their organizations, and are there things that are happening that are creating marginalization that, Brandi just talked about? You can't have the training on microaggression and bias, but then also allow barriers, people that are knowingly putting up barriers, that are creating blind spots, that are frankly making it impossible for people to effectively do their jobs, just and under the perspective of, well, this is just who I am and how and I'm successful perhaps at what they're doing. That shouldn't matter. If you want this culture, a positive culture, if you want to keep, recruit, retain, have a reputation of being inclusive, then you're going to have to acknowledge that these barriers and that these behaviors are happening and that they're not acceptable. I would be, if I'm being truthful there, when we talk about showing up and being your authentic self, for the most part, I am my authentic self every single day. But the reality is there are things that I say and there are things that others that don't look like me say, and they can get away with that. And I know I can never get away with that. And that's, I feel, without going into too much detail, the reality is that many diverse people in the workplace, we know what we can say and what we can't say. And I'm not saying it's acceptable. Certain things are acceptable regardless of what your color is or what your gender is, but it happens. And I think even acknowledging that is a step in the right direction. One thing I'll say about BCW Global, and frankly, what I'm so impressed with is look at our CEO. She's a female. She's one of the few females leading this, global marketing communications agency. The president of North America, Black male, incredible. But again, something that you don't see. We have a number of, I'm sitting on the executive leadership team for North America. You have a number of women on the leadership team. So I think to the point of what companies can do, well, this is a great example of demonstrating that they're committed to diversity and inclusion, and that representation is happening across at senior levels, executive levels. So that's something else that I would encourage more businesses to strive to demonstrate and replicate.
Yeah, we're doing a study now where we're going to the website to look at the exec leadership team and coding both by gender and race, because a lot of companies now are making statements about it, but if it's not visible at the top, then it's problematic. So Kristena, you mentioned some language that I want to talk about, and I know Brandi on our prep call did too. So all three of you are very passionate about mentorship and sponsorship, especially with rising women of color. But first, let's talk about some of the terms that you use. Kristena, you used the word accomplice, and I believe Brandi, you also used the term, and then you also said sponsor, ally. So why don't someone tell me a little bit about the different terms that you use and what sort of that looks like? What are the differences among them?
Well, I know Brandi has, I love her definition of ally and accomplices. So I'll let her tackle that. Just in terms of champions and sponsors, regardless of who you are, you need them to continue growing and advancing in your career. And so what I always coach people, whether they're new in the industry, frankly, they could be at the same peers or people that I've grown up with in the industry, is that you need to look at your pie. So someone, a woman, Judy Tolan at Facebook actually, had shared this with me a few years ago, and I just thought it was brilliant, and it's something that I've adopted ever since. But basically your PI stands for performance, image, exposure. And so your performance is basically, that's your price of entry. That's you need to be, as I always say, you want to be the rock star talent. You want to be that person that is accountable. You're getting stuff done. You truly are. You're proactive. You're on it, right? That's the P part of that. The I is the image. And so you could be a rock star talent, but if you're difficult to work with, if, we just talked about, if you're someone that doesn't embrace diversity and inclusion, that's not collaborative, that frankly might be inconsistent, or your image is everything, because that's how people are perceiving you, that we're talking, think about reputation. You want to make sure that you're successfully managing that reputation and safeguarding it. So then that gets you to the E, and you want to move along that pie, right? So the E is the exposure. You need the P to get, the P is the price of entry. The I is if you have a great image, but the E, if you're going to advance, you need those champions, those sponsors, those people who, when you're not in the room, are advocating on your behalf, who are saying, you know what, you should put Kristena Lucky on this because she's amazing when it comes to integrated marketing. She's really thinking about mission driven. She really knows how to build brands and help brands make a difference and move people. That's what you want, someone acting. It's basically, think of like passive income. You want someone acting on your behalf and giving you those opportunities, because you're not going to be everywhere, and you're certainly not going to be in those rooms when it's at that executive, that leadership level. The challenge is that many people don't have those. They don't have champions and sponsors. And because they're not diligent about safeguarding and managing their pie, they're just at a disadvantage. And so, I just encourage, I always encourage people to take a look, to assess, but make sure that you're doing everything that you need to do to move along that spectrum and get those champions and sponsors who can open those doors for you. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but if you're not on people's radar, you're not on people's radar. And it doesn't matter if that you've been there for 5 years, 10 years, it doesn't matter. You have to be on people's radar. So you definitely need the champions and sponsors, those advocates who can act on your behalf and advance you up.
All right, Brandi, give it to us.
All right. So allies and accomplices. So I want both, but I really want an accomplice. An ally, think about it, it's a verb, right? But an ally is usually somebody who is, they're a disruptor in their own right, but an educator for where they stand and speak up and speak out for those who are marginalized or underrepresented. But an accomplice takes it a step further. An accomplice is like someone who is direct and ready to take action for a particular group. But I think what is really interesting about accomplices and allies is that sometimes allies might hold some personal guilt or shame that they might be harboring, or they're like, you know what, my privilege, white guilt, it's very real. I feel a little bit, about it. An accomplice, they are not motivated by guilt or shame. They are ready to stand with you at all costs. They are not emotionally fragile. They are ready to disrupt, blow up. Go think about like an accomplice who helps you, like, if a burglar, your accomplice to the fact you are in there with the person. I think that's, a key difference between an accomplice and an ally. I definitely want an ally to advocate for me. And allies it's a constant journey. You don't just like wake up one day and you say, you know what, Tina, I think I'm going to be an ally today. I think today's the day. I feel it in my bones. I want to get out there and be an ally for somebody that is not white. I want to do that. It's a journey. You're constantly improving yourself. You're constantly learning about yourself. You're constantly figuring out, okay, what can I do to contribute? And very interestingly enough, just yesterday, and little shameless plug, but for my Black History Month post, I wrote an article that says, thank you, Franklin Armstrong. I wrote an article that says, thank you, Franklin Armstrong. And of course, everyone's like, who is Franklin Armstrong, Brandi? And I say, Franklin Armstrong is the one and only Black character of the Peanuts comic book series. The only Black character, Franklin Armstrong. Love Franklin. Good dancer. He's athletic. Love Franklin. But I didn't know the backstory of how Charles Schulz got to Franklin. And so you can go on LinkedIn, you can read my post. I'll give you just a little bit. But a white school teacher in 1968 wrote, after the assassination of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, wrote a letter to Charles Schulz and said, I think you need to have a Black character. She said, I'm very visibly shaken about what has happened in our country, and I want to do something. And the thing I wanted to do was to implore you to create a Black character in Peanuts. That's an accomplice. That is not just allyship. She went to this man, the creator, and just a school teacher, nothing to gain. No, she personally felt awful about what was happening. Not guilt or shame, just as a human, felt bad and was like, how can I do my part, or how can I help? And just that letter that she sent him imploring him to create a Black character. 2 months later, Franklin Armstrong was born. So does anybody even know that, to think like a white school teacher was all like, Franklin? Like, what? But that's the kind of thing. So I want an ally, but I want an accomplice too. And I challenge anybody who says, oh yeah, I'm an ally, I've got 3 Black friends, I'm an ally. Like, you're not going to get brownie points with me. You're not going to get brownie points because you hang out with brown and Black people. That's great. What are you doing to disrupt? What are you doing? Are you in it with us? Are you fighting the fight with us? Are you writing a letter to get a Black character in? Like, who wrote the letter to Band-Aid to make Band-Aids? Oh, I don't know, different shades of beige. Like, who did that? Was it the Band-Aid marketing team? Was it somebody did that? That's an accomplice. That's what you want. So again, I welcome allies and I am all for allyship, but I want some pretty darn strong accomplices too.
That's a great story, by the way. Thank you for sharing the Franklin story. Iman, I did want to come over to you. When we're talking about allies, the Women in Workplace study that was McKinsey and Lean In said a lot of people say, I'm an ally, but then when they ask them to rate the specific actions they take, that number drops quite drastically, as Brandi's point. So Iman, what makes like a good ally? What makes a good mentor?
I think for allies or accomplices, I think the biggest thing is making it personal, right? For someone to stick their neck out for you, if you will, when there is no benefit for them. This is someone that is relentless about doing what's right. And you would think that's just being a human. But unfortunately, many of us are motivated by personal gain. And so I think anyone that is doing something that is for the greater good of helping someone in an industry where, again, there are so many barriers, is someone that I've considered ally or an accomplice. I would also say, in terms of a mentor, someone that's available. I mean, for me, I have a personal board of directors, if you will, of people that are in the industry that I talk to either on a monthly basis or weekly basis to just kind of touch base on things that are happening. Is my resume good? Here are my thoughts on this strategy I'm presenting to this executive leadership team. People that are available just to bounce different ideas off of. And they're hopefully speaking for you when you're not in those rooms. I mean, for me, my last several jobs have come from people who have been able to vouch for my experience and what I bring to the table to at least get me in the room. And then from there, I can do the rest. So I think, a mix of someone either being a good ally or being a good mentor, is some of that.
All right, let's talk about the opposite of an ally, and that is the Karen. So Karen is a more common term used to describe a white woman who uses their privilege to get their own way, right? My kids describe it as "where's the manager" sort of philosophy. Let's talk about a workplace Karen. In a workplace Karen, it can be both men and women, but they really hinder progress on the professional advancement of people of color in the workplace. They can block access, they can affect promotion opportunities and personal growth. So do each of you want to talk about this? Is this an issue? So why don't we start with, who wants to start? Who wants to tackle the Karen issue?
Well, it exists. It is not a myth.
It's not a myth. And I don't even know if, people in our industry know they're Karens. Like how you just described about people.
I don't know. I think some of them do know that they are. But even still,
I don't think someone, hopefully they aren't purposely trying to block someone's growth, but there are people who have very antiquated ways about how they go about PR and how someone should posture and carry themselves. And if they don't see that person is in their image, then they don't think they're up for the right opportunity to take on that assignment, to have that promotion, to be considered. For me, I think we've all experienced people that may be a blocker. I think it's about how you navigate it. It's not going to block me from what I want to do, my end goal, which is to continue to grow my career. So, that's why it's important to have these allies, to have these mentors, see if there are people who can speak to you, speak on your behalf when you're not around, because there are going to be people who are going to be a naysayer, and that's in any industry. But if there's someone to say, oh, I know Iman, or, I know Kristena, her work is tight, she's super smart and strategic, then that's going to cancel out someone that doesn't even have anything to possibly even back it up on, but a personal opinion. I mean, to Brandi's point, everyone has bias, and there's definitely bias when it comes to how someone be as a PR practitioner. You know, I'm very introverted at times, and then I could be to myself, but when I speak, I make a point that, oh, that's a great idea. You know, so it's based on making sure that you're able to have people that are all around that can speak to you on your behalf at any given moment.
Kristena?
Yeah, I think so yes, it is not a myth. They do exist, and they can be male or female. And I think everything that we've talked about in terms of blind spots, barriers, marginalization, that's what they do. That's what they create. And whether they knowingly do it, and I do, to Brandi's point, I think some do. It doesn't mean they do it because it's racial, but not always, but they do it. I do think that when it's not addressed, because it's a culture issue. And again, I go back to, it has to be, when those situations arise, you have to get out of it very quickly. That's the one thing, because the longer you stay in those situations, the longer that your career is tied and potentially hindered by these individuals, the more that is going to impact you, both professionally, but more so mentally, emotionally. No one's psychologically, we're just talking about safe spaces. No one has the mental capacity to deal with that on a regular basis. So I always urge people, you need to get out of those situations, address it, acknowledge it, to the proper, elevate it up where you need to elevate it up, and see if they're going to take action and responsibility. If leadership isn't, then you need to pivot out. That's when you have to have a hard conversation to say, and look at the culture and acknowledge if you're getting the support that you need here in order to be able to effectively do your job, grow and thrive in your career, because that's what happens. They can hamper your growth in your career and your just ability to perform successfully without issue.
Okay, so last year, and I know we've talked about this already, but while we were in the throes of COVID, we saw the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and then George Floyd, followed by Black Lives Matter protests, and also some very polarized opinions about it as well. In our recently published, we have a top 10 list of studies. We had a women in workplace report, and I just wanted to read a section. I would like to get your thoughts on it. Black women have always had distinct and by and large worse experiences at work. They are promoted more slowly than other groups and are significantly underrepresented in senior leadership. They are less likely than women of other races and ethnicities to say their manager advocates for new opportunities. They are also disproportionately impacted by the difficult events of 2020. They are more than twice as likely as women overall to say that the death of a loved one has been one of their biggest challenges during the COVID. And, Brandi, you even mentioned this, that incidents of racial violence are exacting a heavy emotional toll. What would you like to say about this?
So, I mean, I'm not surprised to hear any of these stats, of course, as a Black female. And it's a very real thing within workplaces, including my own. And if you look at just the traumas and triggers that Black females, whether you're in corporate agency or what have you, that we are dealing with in addition to COVID, in addition to social injustice and racial inequality, it's exhausting and overwhelming. And this myth of the strong Black woman, she must always be strong, she must always carry the burden. I think it's time to stop that and normalize that Black women matter too. That needs to be part of when you're talking about wellness, when you're talking about your employee well-being, that's not, oh, are the white people okay? Or spaces dominated by whiteness, but you need to be focused on the Black woman. And there have been so many things, and Malcolm X even said this back in the 60s, that the most disrespected person on earth is the Black female. And then recently, whether you like her or not, I like her, but that's just me, Megan Thee Stallion said, we must protect Black women. And on her Saturday Night Live appearance, she had the Malcolm X quote that the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. Now she's doing that and using her platform as a rapper to showcase this message, but it's a very real thing. And we did an engagement survey within our company to see how people were dealing with COVID and what was happening with COVID. And we got a large percentage of white women said, I'm not doing well. There's a lot of, pressure. I'm overwhelmed, just, not handling. And then double that, about 60% of Black women said that they really weren't doing okay. And that wasn't okay with me. I wanted my communications leadership team to address that. I wanted to personally address that and do something to ensure other Black women in the company knew that your wellness matters just like you matter. And so we get so caught up in Black Lives Matter. Again, like I said, I want to say Black women's lives matter too. I think in looking at your survey, Tina, the question I would say is, does IPR or other organizations, are you doing anything specific to Black women in this industry? Are we taking actions specifically for Black women? And it's something that I think we should do, not just in February. I think that should be a 365, because guess what? I'm not going to downplay my Blackness in March and really play up my femininity because it's Women's History Month, or on March 8th, I don't become really, really female, a little less Black and really, really female. I'm pretty sure I'll still be Black in March, but it doesn't stop. So we need to figure out a way, like I said, to normalize across the board that Black women, get rid of the myth, the superwoman. Oh, you're strong, you can take it. That needs to stop. We are humans, we have emotions, we have a breaking point, just like anybody else does. So that needs to be recognized.
Yeah, and to answer your question, no, we don't do enough specifically for Black women, nor would I identify anyone in the industry except for ColorCom. That's the only really association that I can think of specifically targeting Black women. So your answer is no. And it's unfortunate. And we absolutely need to change. But yes, I do recognize that, we're not. Kristena, Iman, anything to add to that?
Only that, unfortunately, I wish that wasn't the case. And I can personally say, you're so focused on you're trying to achieve, this is what I want to get done, that I know I park it here. I just put it here because I'm just trudging through, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that I'm not impacted. I actually am very impacted. What happened with George Floyd, with Ahmaud Arbery, with Breonna Taylor, just and I remember, there were so many things going on with work at the time, but it's like I had to deliver, and I just park it here. And so, and then once it's done, then you're able to, to process it. But is that healthy? I think it's as much as what is the industry doing, what can do better, what can we do better, where can organizations, associations step into. But at the same time, I also, I need to take a look at myself too. And I'm not, I don't want to put it on Black women by any means, but one thing I have tried to do is just be more mindful, focus on my self-care, and not be apologetic about it, because you can't. There is only so much that you can personally do. And when I think of last year, I look at it from the perspective of, as a wife, as a mother. I barely got through my daughter through kindergarten with just the homeschooling. It was quite troubling, just given her age and the need there. I'm a Black woman looking at all the social injustice issues, and frankly, I had COVID. So, and when I think of the statistics there in terms of Black and brown and the number of people that were impacted, I also, I was fortunate that I survived through it. So, there's a lot of context and that encompasses my life, but I still, I have to remember to not just set aside myself and those experiences just for the sake of the work. I have to take my self-care and seriously too. So yes, it happens. and I want there to be more of a spotlight on making sure that we are supporting Black women.
Absolutely. And I'll just quickly say, I think for all of us, there's been so many other cases before George Floyd, right, where we were seeing things that are happening 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago that were stressful. They may not have had the same type of national attention that now our companies and brands are more tuned into, but we as Black women still carry that weight, right? So, now that we have the ability that the brands and companies are much more aware, to Brandi's point, we carry the cape, we wear the cape, but we don't always want to. And so having that vulnerability and not being that strong Black woman, that's something I'm been trying to get rid of, that type of term for the longest, because it is damaging to who we are. We're soft, we're vulnerable. We have families, we care about people, it hits us hard. And it's because we're communicators on top of that. We're also writing about these issues. So sometimes to say, hey, I need a second just to process so I can give you my best thinking, is part of making sure we're protecting ourselves.
There are some great PR scholars out there who are looking to like decolonize the PR curriculum, which is it's still very white male heavy as far as the history. And Museum of PR has been really great at that as well. So in celebration of Black History Month, do each of you want to tell me a Black leader, could be modern day or historical, or hero who you admire, who you think people should learn more about? So Iman, why don't we start with you?
Well, happy Black History Month, everyone. Very excited. I would say, obviously right now, I am so into Amanda Gorman. I mean, I know she's everywhere. She's doing the Super Bowl, but she is such a force. Her poise, her honesty as a Black woman, her poem was amazing. And now I'm obsessed. I've ordered the book. I've gotten the poem. Like, I am all about her. I think that what she's doing at such a young age, she will be around for a very long time. I see her as the next Maya Angelou, and I'm excited about her.
All right, what about you, Kristena?
Oh goodness, there's so many. I just have to say, I'm still a huge fan of the Obamas, and I think just both, the president, the former president, and the former first lady. I think just collectively, they are they set such an amazing example of what it means to be good, of what it means to be strong, of what it means to have reasonable discussion and debate, that you don't have to agree on everything, and just to be respectful and diplomatic. And frankly, I think that it's just such a positive image and a North Star for so many. And the reality is that we're still divided, and we know that. And to have, just to have someone that is at least open to not necessarily agreeing on all the issues or on the other side, but is willing to at least, open the dialogue and push for another opportunity, push for another way of looking at things, to find those alternative answers, but to at least investigate and explore, I think is pretty impressive. I've, might be because I used to live in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Chicago, but there are some, I'm just grateful that they came into the world and played such a pivotal role in the world. And I think that they'll continue to play a role for many, many decades, if not centuries.
Hey, Brandi.
So I have a tie. So I am a huge Rosalind Brewer fan now, as the Black CEO of the only Black female CEO of a Fortune 500 company right now. Huge. I love the work that she did at Starbucks. The fact Melody Hobson's like my real good friend Rosalind. Like, I am here for all of the beautiful Black girl magic that she is bringing to Walgreens, to the Fortune 500 list. Like, I am obsessed with her now. And so, like, it's almost like one of those things, like, but Rainey, what do you want for your birthday? And I'll be like, can I have like a virtual coffee chat with Rosalind Brewer? Like, that would be like my birthday present. And I'm happy with that. Obviously not like an Oprah situation, but I definitely have a girl crush on her. But my tie is someone for me who is really, she inspires me, and she's a trailblazer in the advertising media communication space. And I don't know if you all know, Kristena mentioned Chicago, Renata McCann, who works at Leo Burnett, who is, to me, Renata's like, she is Miss Chicago. But what a lot of people don't know is her story, which I told her I'm her like default publicist. I want to tell this story so badly. She was one of the first Black female CEOs of an advertising company. And I asked her, I wanted to know all of the tea, the good, the bad, the ugly. When she showed up, did people think that she was there to get coffee and not the CEO? I asked her like about deals, client. I mean, I was like, girl, tell me everything. Like, I want to know everything, because it was at a time we were not as progressive as we are today. And she is a spitfire. If you know her, she doesn't take anything from anybody. But that experience, I want to know, and she can name names, who did what when, and what did that journey look like for her? And so she gave me a little bit of snippet. I keep telling her, we're going to tell this story, but she is such a hero to me, because I know it can be done. And like Kristena said, we need to see more at a leadership level. And I know it can be done because she did it. And so if the cycle is taking some time to come back around, maybe we need to go to her like, all right, what if I tell your story, like what can we do to move this along? Because she did it, and she did it at a time when it wasn't easy to do and it wasn't accepted to do. She did it. So I love her. She's my other girl crush.
And to your point, Brandi, like
My book. Sorry, go
they
ahead.
couldn't deny her, right? Like she was so good that they couldn't deny Renata, right? They had to, at that time, you think about the importance of that. We talk about allies and accomplices, like they could not deny her that she needs to be in that role at that time period. So she definitely has some stories.
Yes. I love her. I love her. I'm telling you, we're going to tell the story. She knows, because I keep telling her, I'm like, girl, we're going to do this.
You have to write her book, Brandi.
I already offered. I told her, do it for free. I work for Hugs. She and I have already had this conversation. Like, we've talked about it. I just like, when do I have time to like sleep, much less write her book? But it is on the to-do list. It is legit on the to-do list.
That's good. We would definitely help promote it heavily.
You guys, she's like heaven in a bottle. Like I just can't say.
I've seen her speak many a times in Chicago.
She is
amazing.
I love her.
All right, that was a great way to wrap up this episode of In a Car with IPR. I wanted to thank our amazing guests, Iman, Kristena, and Brandi, who, you all told amazing stories, and I appreciate your openness and sharing this with us. So thank you all for being here so much. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. We are going to have part 2 of this amazing all-star cast. So stick around and you're going to see these 3 again soon. So bye.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you for watching this episode of In a Car with IPR. Want to make a tax-deductible contribution to support this series and fund research in the profession? Please visit us at instituteforpr.org/contribute.